Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. We are back. It has been a few weeks for Major 2, since Major 2 final, and we're back now with Major 3 Week 1. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, CDLMetrics. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing well. It's been a little while since we've recorded, and we're doing this a little later in the week because it took a while to get lines on the matches, but we finally got them, and there's a lot of interesting ones to talk about. And yeah, tons of roster moves going on. Like almost half the teams have a different lineup coming into this week. Yeah, we're officially past the halfway point of the season, just because we only have, I think, 10 qualifiers between Major 3 and 4, and then 2 more majors left. So just past the halfway point. But yeah, still tons to talk about and super excited for this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a good weekend, and there's a lot of changes, so let's jump right into this. So, first of all, just a recap of what we bet last week for the Major. Not a great week for us in terms of that, but again, to be fair, though, we only do start with 4 of the games that would happen all week, so it's not necessarily a picture of how our weekend went. Yeah, obviously, Thieves lost to Boston, so they did not cover the minus 72.5. But New York did take out Toronto, so that was cool. But then Carolina just no-showed against Vancouver, so that was very rough. And then you pinned everything on the other game of all that, Minnesota, and they covered. I think they covered the hardpoint spread, but they didn't cover anything else against Atlanta.
That sounds right. I think they kept it close in the map 1, kind of, and then map 2 and map 3 were ugly. But yeah, I knew what I was getting into, and I know, like I mentioned it a couple weeks ago when we recorded, I was like, I can just see it now where FaZe steamroll through Rocker and they don't lose a match and they win the major. And sure enough, that's how it turned out. Yeah, I knew what I was getting into, but I'm still a little upset that Rocker just no-showed as well.
Yeah. And then moving on, the combined model plays again, just the thing. Obviously, Carolina didn't get very far, but Boston, they did cover the plus 2.5. Carolina, obviously, they had a really rough week, but not a lot of plays for us. Because we couldn't, because it was just the first day there with only the 4 matches. CDL points contest update. This is a very important update because we have a definite change here at the top. I am now in first. Me and my shadow, we're first now, but very close after that is Doug Leby, just 15 points back. And then you're very close as well, just 35 points back of first place as well. And I will say that it's cool that we put on this contest and we're winning. So I think that's pretty cool. We open it up to the public, and if we were losing, I'd be like, oh, maybe our fans are smarter than us, but no, we know what we're talking about here, so that's good that we're at the top here. But yeah, I think it's a really cool bracket. It's a really cool contest, and a lot of strategy and thought went into this. And I think for us at the top, I think it's definitely panning out generally the way we saw it. That being said, though, I don't really know what other way you would want to go with this, right? I think with the exception of it's a bit difficult, right? I think I don't know really who would have the edge at this point. I think it's basically, does Carolina pick it up after Major 2, or do they continue a downward slide? How does Vancouver respond? I think that's and what about Toronto? I think that's really the kind of thing that's going to decide who wins this thing. If Vancouver, if Vancouver keeps it strong and Carolina tapers off a bit, and or Toronto keeps staying a bit lower, then I think, because only a few people picked Vancouver, only me and some of the other people, but they also picked Optic instead of FaZe. So the combination of FaZe and Thieves is definitely the top combo there, right? And you're looking at 5 of the top 7 have that combo. But outside of that, not many other people picked Surge, so I'm pretty happy with that call.
Yeah, I think a couple things stand out very clearly. If you picked FaZe, you're not in the basement, that's for sure. Everyone who has FaZe is in the top 12 of 16 or however many people are listed here. And that makes sense. They've won both majors. They really only had one rough patch, and that was in the first couple weeks of the season. Since then, they've been amazing. They haven't won all the minors, but you win the majors, those are huge points for sure. Yeah, the Thieves thing is interesting because they're very scattershot. If you have Thieves, you're either in the top 7 or you're in the bottom 5. And what really was the difference was, did you pair them with Phase or Optic? Like Optic only being at 110, like that's 80 points back of Ravens, that's 75 back of Surge. Like Optic were the third most expensive team, and the fact that they're just over the 100 point mark is not great. So yeah, those big 3 teams like Phase, Thieves, Optic, those were the 3 most expensive teams. Which of those did you pick? How did you pair those teams? That is really the game that we're playing here. And then the interesting part that differentiates like your team from my team or Doug's team is like you went for like double barrel elite teams and then pair them with one of those teams that was priced in the middle that you were hoping would be good. And it turns out like Surge are good, and that is really carrying you through. Doug and I, it looked like, had a similar idea where it's like we want an elite team. We want a team that can compete for a major. Maybe they can't win like Toronto, but they're at least going to be consistent all year and get us points. And then pair those with a couple of cheap teams. Like the extra team for us mattered a lot. And for the most part, they've been doing well. Like I've only got 110 and 100 out of Boston and Miami. But for where they were priced, those are pretty good outcomes. And hopefully they can get more as the year goes on. But yeah, fascinating. I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, like Doug is... I was like, it's a race for second because Doug is so far and away ahead of everybody. I think I said, like, the only way he doesn't win is if Thieves just don't win a major, and I would be shocked if that happened. But now we're 2 majors in, and they still haven't won, and they had a pretty disappointing 4th-place finish at Major 2. So I think he's still in a very good spot, only 15 back. But, yeah, still tons of COD to go through, and I'm super excited to track this down the stretch.
Yeah, and just a quick note on that, too, because looking at your pairing, you've got Boston, Miami. That's 110 and 100 points, 210 points. Surge is only 185. Mm-hmm. And I'm fairly sure that Boston and Miami were cheaper than Surge, I think. Or very close to it, I think.
Yeah, I want to say Surge was... They might be equal in terms of price combined. Like Surge, I want to say, was $7, and Boston and Miami were like $4 or $3 each. So it was, pick a team in the middle or take a couple cheap ones. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, again, it really depends. If Toronto and Carolina, and I guess you're more hoping on Toronto, if Toronto get a top 4 at a major, and if Surge fall back a bit, maybe they don't make a Sunday, then you're right back into this. So it's not decided yet. It's very close at the top. I was more than 35 points back last week, and now look at me. So we're definitely still in this. It's not over. League news. There's actually been a lot of league news. Obviously, FaZe won the major. You can see here they beat Surge. Then, they beat Rocker. Sorry, that graphic's a little confusing. They beat Rocker, then they beat Cloud9, then they beat Surge 3-2, and then they 4-0 Surged. Thieves lost in round 1, but then they tore through the bottom half of the bracket, and then eventually lost to Ultra, but then Ultra got eliminated by Surge to get back up into the grand finals. Optic was starting the losers bracket. They 3-0'd Rocker, but then it got immediately 3-0'd by Ultra, and that led to a team change. They've done a team change now with Pred fully gone now. He will be with the Las Vegas Falcons, which is something I called weeks. I called that like in I think a 3rd or 4th episode, I think, if I remember correctly. And then there's been a couple other team changes as well. But yeah, that's the bracket from the major. There's also some updates here in the meta. So Dealership is in, and Rewind returns, which is actually cool, because I actually really like Rewind. It was a really cool map. But Skyline is out, and Vault is out in Search and Destroy. These are the only changes from the map pool, right? There's no hardpoint or control changes?
Correct, yeah. Nothing in hardpoint, nothing in control. But yeah, I really wasn't expecting this to happen. I know there were some whispers about maybe subbing in... There was Dealership and then one other new map that got added like a couple months ago that people were talking about. But yeah, this news broke from the league. They said, hey, we got 2 new maps, and then 2 maps that we've been playing all year. They are out. Skyline and Vault were okay to watch. I'd say Vault got very repetitive in terms of if you're on attack, you are just hard hitting that A bomb that's in that like downstairs pool area. That was really the only like viable bomb plant. We saw other bomb plants to be if teams like wrapped out. And then Skyline it's just a weird map because it's so small. So for Search, I don't know. It's not great. You get the gunfights really early usually, but yeah, interested to see how Dealership plays. And yeah, I agree. I didn't mind Rewind at all. I was actually surprised to see it go. We played it 20% of the time during weeks 1 and 2, right what you would expect from a viable search map. And yeah, Skyline and Vault were played at a little below 20%. They were relatively unpopular. So I guess it makes sense. But yeah, just something to keep in mind as we go through this weekend and to the end of the season, because I really don't think we'll see much else for map changes from here on out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it now. I don't anticipate any more changes because they usually like to solidify them at this point. So I don't think, and there's no huge maps that are like huge problem areas. Control is pretty well balanced, so I think this is probably going to be it for that. Roster changes. Here we go. Hook is in, Pred is out. That's on top of the previous roster change, which was Kenny out and Sky's in. Miami, Super is in, Lucky is out. Minnesota, Kenny is in, Paul X is out. LAG is a fellow and Johnny in, Linz and Priest out. Those are two familiar faces to people who have followed the league, and specifically, I think LAG too. They've been on either LAG or Paris, I think. Can't remember which team they were on, but they've definitely been on a couple of teams. And then Vegas Falcons did basically a team wipe. They have Xnid, RCD's Pred and Priesta now, and they got rid of 3 of their other guys. It's really funny that the Vegas team just basically went out and bought the best players they could, and to be fair, they did a pretty half-decent job, especially in terms of Pred. They got Pred for whatever you can get him for. RCD's is probably, I guess, the next best, most seasoned player. Priesta, questionable, but still a decent player. And Xnid, I think, was the best player on their team at that point. I think the biggest question here is, and especially for people who, when we go back to the point, when you look back at the point standings, there's a bunch of people who pick Falcons as like a freebie, like, oh, however many points they get, it's fine. I think some of the people picking them probably anticipated something along this line of them eventually changing the team over to something like this. Do you think it's going to work? Do you think we're in a position where, oh, hey, you know what, actually, maybe they could. I don't think it's completely out of the realm possibility this team could make champs. They're not that bad. They're at a massive disadvantage. But if they go on a bit of a run here, they could actually make champs.
It would take a lot. They're not technically dead yet, but they are still at 0 points. If I squint hard enough, yeah, I could see them making it. They're probably going to need 2 top 3 finishes at Major 3 and Major 4, and then pick up some qualifier wins here and there. And if you're finishing top 3 at these majors, you're probably finishing in winner's bracket. So if you can win 2 or 3 of your qualifiers, force a winner's bracket start, navigate through the bracket and avoid these elite teams, like maybe they can do it. But they are so far down. Like, it's just tough when we're already this late into the season and you're down. Like, I think the team in 8th right now has 100 points. And, like, those teams that are around the cut line are going to play each other and gain more points. So, yeah, it's going to take a lot, but this lineup should be quite a bit better than what we've seen. It is a little weird still. Like, they're keeping one of the Saudi players in Xnid, who is fine. Like, he's been one of their better players, I guess, but still a little shaky there. You're bringing in Arcides, who we know, like, he's been in the league a lot. He's been up and down from challengers in the pros the last couple of years, but he knows what he's doing. You bring in Pred, who, like, we know his ceiling. Like, Pred is one of the best players when he's at his best, but this season has been very disappointing for him. That whole Optic fiasco for the last couple of months has been a little ugly. He got dropped or benched and then brought back in, and just Optic was never good with him in the lineup. So maybe a change of scenery will do him well, but I'm just worried that we might get more of the same with him just because the teammates around him are unquestionably worse than the ones he had on Optic. But again, yeah, change of scenery could help. And Priesta, he's been in the league for the entirety of the CDL. He's been on some quality teams. This year has been a struggle for him so far on LAG, but again, you get some vets in to pair up with a couple of question mark players and a couple of inconsistent players. Like, it's at least a step in the right direction. I don't know if, like, the thing we have to remember is the old Vegas Falcons, right? Every spread was a +2.5. The question was, is this going to be a series that Vegas push it to a map for? That's where we are at with Vegas. I think a fair question to ask now is, let's assume this team is better. It's how often can they push it to a map 5? And then if they're doing that, we should expect them to get some wins. It should be a huge boost for them in hardpoint, a nice boost for them in control. We'll see how their search plays out. Their search has been not the worst in the league, even with their old lineup. But again, it's a whole new team, so maybe they get a little worse in search, maybe they get a little better. That one's a little trickier to figure out, I think. But at the very least, they should be more competitive in respawns. And if they're more competitive, that should lead to longer series and eventually wins. I still think they are definitely a bottom 2 or 3 team in the league, but they might surprise some people. Who knows? They are a huge wild card. A couple other ones I just want to quickly mention. The Hook in for Pred makes a ton of sense. Like I mentioned that a couple weeks ago before the major that like they were bringing in Skies for Kenny. We knew that, and I was still like, okay, that could work. Kenny hasn't been great, but like the common denominator here is that Pred is still in the lineup and he hasn't been good while he's been on that Optic team. So Hook is in when he was in earlier this season with Shotzi. Like those two looked fantastic. So yeah, I do expect Optic to get better from what they've looked like. And then yeah, Kenny lands on Minnesota. I think that is what should be an upgrade. I know he hasn't been great lately, but Paul X hasn't been either. So just getting away from the Optic camp, landing on a Minnesota team that is good, not great. Like I think it's only going to help Kenny in the short term at least. And Rocker, I think, are smart for making that move. LAG, I think, had to make a move. So we'll see if Fellow and Johnny can do anything there. And then Miami's move is justifiable too. They have a big roster. I don't think we've seen Super yet at all this year. They've struggled, so it makes sense that they would switch out one of their players as well. So I think they all make sense, and I think all the teams are probably in a good position because of it, or at least a better position from where they were just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we'll talk about Vegas because they're up next. So actually, they're very soon now. So speaking of the qualifiers, here is expected wins. Again, this graph looks very similar to last one, especially with the FaZe and Thieves there at the top. This is your expected wins for your model, the CDLMetrics model. There's Toronto, Vancouver, Boston, Vegas. Again, this is going to be the theme in the next couple slides. Ignore that number. That number should be a lot higher, but that's the best we could do with based on current knowledge. And then kind of Minnesota above the cut line, everybody else below it. Here's mine. Again, a bit more similar. You can see where my model is a bit more bullish on Cloud9 and not very bullish on Optic. Where do you have Optic? You have Optic just a bit above Minnesota. Mine weirdly doesn't. My model solidly has Optic down here. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We'll have to see. I think both our models have FaZe as slight favorites to get the number 1 seed, but again, you're at a point where a random upset win could be the difference between first and second seed, right? That doesn't really matter that much. No, not really, but that's how these qualifiers work. Yeah, I think that's roughly where we think. 2 teams are the best above, basically the same picture we've seen all year. The 2 top teams above everybody else, and then there's just a clown car after that, and then yeah, in terms of the next 3 best, and then the next everybody else after that. Match previews going on for this week. So first match, Vegas versus Surge. So we get to see the new look Falcons right off the bat. Surge minus 450 on the money line. Vegas plus 300. Surge minus 1.5 minus 200. Vegas plus 1.5 plus 150. Surge is 42.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. So our numbers in here, you can pretty much just ignore all of our numbers here because they're clearly wrong. Again, we didn't make any adjustments for Vegas's new lineup. I don't think you can. There's no real way you can make this adjustment even if you wanted to. I have no idea what you would even do. So we're just going to go with it for now. It'll clean up itself in a few weeks, but just assume that it's higher. And that's what the betting lines have it as well. The question is, looking at this roster, where are they going to be strong? We know Pred is good at hardpoint, but when we think of good hardpoint players, we don't really think of Arcides and Priesta. Those are definitely more search players. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see this as more of a search team, more of a hardpoint team? What do you think?
That's a hard question to answer. I will say, like I said earlier, so Vegas's search with their old team was bad, but not like the bottom of the league bad. Like, they would find search wins here and there with that lineup. And for the most part, the talk around that team that was all 4 Saudi Arabian players was search is their thing. Like, they have played a ton of search. Like, that would be the game mode we would expect them to be good in. And not to mention that, like, underdogs find wins in Search and Destroy more than they find wins in Hardpoint. That's pretty obvious, I think, for most people, just because there's far fewer gun engagements. You can just breeze through around 11 and get a win on the board. So that made sense. I guess I would think of this current team also as a Search and Destroy focused team. Like, they're going to probably have to bank on that in order to get wins. But there's no doubt this team will be better in Hardpoint and Control. Like, the old Vegas never won a Hardpoint. They got close a few times, but most of the time they're losing by 100. So you put in, like, actual pros and guys who have been in the Challenger scene and have been in COD for a while. Like, maybe they don't gel at first and maybe they still lose a lot, but they're gonna find some success in Hardpoint and Control. So here's what I did, and tell me if this makes sense. I'm assuming, right, this new Vegas Falcons team better than the old Vegas Falcons team. It's not, that I don't think is a bold statement. What I did is I took Vegas's Hardpoint and I said, let's pretend that instead of being the 12th best team in Hardpoint, I'm just going to call them the 11th best team in Hardpoint. And so far this year, my numbers say that LAG have been the 11th best team in Hardpoint. They've been very bad in Hardpoint all year. But I said, all right, let's give Vegas Falcons Hardpoint power rating equal to LAG's. And I left their search numbers just exactly where they were because you can make an argument maybe this team will improve their search and destroy. Maybe it won't because it's a bunch of new guys and we got to see how that plays out. So I just left their search as is, which is about 9th or 10th in the league. And then for Control, I said, what if they're not the 12th best team? They're the 11th best team. And to me, that is Boston, who aren't much higher than old Vegas, but they are a little better. So you bump them up a little in Hardpoint, you bump them up a little in Control, and just doing like napkin math, Vegas to win this series, you can see my model has them at 7% about. If you apply those Hardpoint and Control ratings, it bumps them up to 19%, which is a huge bump, but it's still short of where the market has them at 25%. And even just today, that market number has fluctuated. Like, I think Vegas about an hour ago were like plus 275 on the money line. Now they're plus 300, so there's a little bit of pushback with people liking Vancouver. And I tend to lean that direction in this specific match, just with what I just said. I think that 19%, 20% to win this specific series is about right. Like, Vancouver should still be an overwhelming favorite. They're a great team. They've come on really strong in the last couple of months. And although, I mean, they finished they finished runners-up at Major 2. Like, they were right there. They had a relatively easy path to get there, but they still got there. They're still very good. I think if I'm leaning anywhere, it is Vancouver Surge. The -1.5 is -200, which is pretty steep to pay. So if you'd rather just take Vancouver to sweep, that is understandable. Or if you'd rather do a spread here or there in a specific map, I think that's justifiable as well. But it's really hard to try to figure out where Falcons should be, because you can make an argument like, okay, making them the 11th best hardpoint team or the 11th best control team isn't maybe doing enough. Like, maybe they should be like the 10th best or the 9th best, or we don't know. Like, we just have to wait and see. But even just going from 12th to 11th in both of those game modes, it's a huge jump because of where they were. That's where I'm at with this. But you really gotta, like I said, do some napkin math to get there.
Yeah, it's not clear, and I think it's clear that we need to watch this team in action and see what it does before we have a clear picture. We'll have a better sense next week of what, but any number we put up for Vegas this week is wrong, so we just need to accept that and go from there. Second match on Friday, Minnesota versus Optic -500 on the money line. Minnesota plus 333, -1.5, -200, +1.5, +150. Optic is 42.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the control, 1.5 round favorites in the search and control, both 1.5. our models kind of both here like Minnesota, and it's a bit weird, I would say, as to why. I think the market is just kind of, I feel like the market is kind of, oh, optics fixed now. Okay. And the thing is, to be fair, this is a little concerning of a bet for me simply because we literally saw this game last week. Not last week, but in the last week of Call of Duty action, we saw Optic versus Minnesota in losers round 1, and Optic 3-0'd them. And I think my model also liked Minnesota in that game as well. They covered the hard point spread, but then they got crushed in the search and in the control. But I feel like this number is way too high. A minus 500 for Optic, I think that's just way too high of a number. I think if you're looking at this, basically feels to me like the books are saying, all right, cool, you like Optic, you think Optic's fixed, go ahead, we want your money. And I think that's where this number sits at, and that's why I think there is some value in Minnesota here. I think there's definitely some value in like Minnesota map 1 spread, maybe in a search spread as well. I don't think all of Optic's problems are fixed. Also, Minnesota got rid of Priest, and they replaced him as well, so Minnesota could be a bit better as well. Do I think Optic is going to be that much better on paper? Do you want Hook in place of Pred? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. You make an argument in terms of team dynamic. Hook might play better in there than Pred would. I don't know. They were okay with Pred, but they were okay with Hook. But then bad stuff happened on that team without Pred anyways. So I honestly don't know. I don't know what to make of this Optic team. All I know is that I feel like you're paying a high price for feeling that basically you're going to be paying a very high price if you want to say Optic is fine, they're back to form, we're good to go.
Yeah, complete agreement here. Like, I think the price might even be higher because this is the last game we saw Rocker play, and it was a 3-0. And now the belief is, okay, Pred is out, Hook is in. When Hook was in, you could make an argument that Optic were the best team in the league for the first month and a half of the season before they hit Major 1 and kind of flamed out. But yeah, the Shotzi Hook thing I think is legit. Like, when they have been paired up, they've been pretty good. And it's been multiple titles where we've seen that, and it's been rather consistent. I think the last time where it was a little iffy was probably Cold War. They were both on Dallas Empire, and Dallas started pretty well that season, but then I think that was the same season where Hook stepped away for a while and they had to find a replacement. But early in the season, Hook looked unbelievable. So whatever those two have, they got good chemistry at the very least. And I'm not saying that Hook is a better player than Pred, but this season he very well might be, just because, I don't know. I've seen Pred play enough this year where I'm like, something ain't right. Like, this game he doesn't have figured out yet, or the teamwork, or the spawns, there's just something off. And again, maybe Pred can bounce back on his new team. But yeah, I agree. I think this price is out of control. I think making Optic a favorite is justified based on the fact that we just saw these teams play. Optic were clearly the better team that day, 3-0. Maybe they're even better, but let's not forget that Minnesota will grab Kenny off of Optic for this match, which makes this super, super intriguing. And you got to think that's probably a move in the right direction if you're Minnesota. Like, getting Kenny in, Paul X out. Paul X kind of shaky throughout the year. He's had his ups and a lot of downs. So if you can put in a stabilizing force like Kenny, and I think it's going to be good for Kenny to get away from the Optic camp, because Optic has been it's been a roller coaster ride in that organization this year. So just get away from that, land on a decent team that's got a good shot at making champs, that has potential. So I think we're in for a really good series. I think it at least gets pushed deep. I think Minnesota are good enough to hang in there. They very well could win. I could absolutely see that happening. I think that'd be a pretty fun story if it did. Kenny gets his revenge immediately on Optic. But yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, this is a must-watch CDL here. And yeah, I just think Optic's price has to come way, way down, because until they actually prove that they are that elite team, I can't get there with a minus 500 favorite. They're not playing like Vegas or LAG. Like, they're playing a solid Rocker team. So, yeah, give me Rocker here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on Rocker on this one as well. Last match on Friday, Ultra versus FaZe minus 300 money line, Ultra plus 225. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 138. Ultra plus 1.5, plus 100. FaZe 33.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. I'm a little iffy on this one. Obviously, we agree with the direction of travel here. We both have FaZe as the favorites, but I think the -1.5 at -138 is a little rich for my blood. Same as the -250. That being said, that does not advise a bet on Ultra in any way. But it's a little too big of a number here for me. I'd much rather that number be closer to +100. I understand why it's -138, but it's just a little too high there. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one's interesting. Really good matchup to end Friday. Honestly, this set of games on Friday may be one of the best of the year when you just think of the storylines and the competitiveness of each game. This could be Vegas Falcons' first win. They have an entirely new team. We know Surge is good, but can they compete? Then you have the whole Kenny versus Optic in the match number 2. And then this game is, we know these teams. These teams are the same. These teams are solidly built. We have the Major 1 and Major 2 champs versus a very good, not an elite team, but a team that can definitely take them out in Toronto Ultra. One thing I want to mention with this, because my model is pointing me in the direction of, hey, Toronto Ultra might cover this and push it to a Game 5, we briefly talked about the new Search and Destroy maps. Skyline and Vault are no longer. And for most teams, I don't expect that to be a big deal, but for Toronto, it might be. Now, there's still a great search team. According to my numbers, Toronto are the number 2 Search and Destroy team, only behind Atlanta FaZe. And they're neck and neck. Both teams have been elite in search. Toronto on Skyline and Vault this year combined 7-0, and number 1 power rank team on Skyline, number 1 power rank team on Vault, according to my numbers. So you're losing both of those, which isn't great. Again, though, they're a very good search team. I expect them to still be good if they play Rewind or if they play this new dealership map. I think they'll be all right. Are they going to be that good where they're the best at both of those maps? Maybe not. The other search maps, I have Toronto ranked 4th, 6th, and 8th on. So totally fine. But yeah, if you're Toronto, you better hope that your Rewind and your dealership is up to snuff, because I think teams are going to challenge you on one or both of those maps if you're not going to veto them. So that is a big thing to keep in mind for Toronto Ultra, is just the Search and Destroy map change. According to the market, I think my model and the market are pretty close in Search and Destroy, but just based on what I said, I might move FaZe up a little bit, closer to maybe a 60-40 favorite there. But that still doesn't make me like FaZe's price. I think the price is pretty good for both sides. I think Toronto, good enough to win a hard point. They can certainly split those at the very least. But they're going to have to probably bank on a couple searches, or maybe they can get control through and then one search. Or there's a couple different ways Toronto can push this to a map 5 or win outright. But man, based on what FaZe looked like a couple weeks ago, it's going to be tough. But Toronto also looked great. They 3-0'd basically everybody in the losers bracket. And some of those teams were decent. One of those teams was LA Thieves. And I know LA Thieves didn't have the best weekend, but still, Toronto showed out for a 3rd place finish. But yeah, FaZe are FaZe. They're very good. So very intrigued to watch this match as well. More of a stay away for me than anything. And I'm just mostly interested in seeing, do Toronto play on those other search maps that are just getting added? And if they do, how do they look? Because if they're a little shaky, then this Toronto Ultra team might struggle a little throughout this set of qualifiers. Yeah, excited to see this one play out.
Yeah, I think so. I think this one will be an interesting game to see as well. Saturday, match 1, Vegas Falcons right back at it against Miami. -163 on the money line. Vegas +120. Miami -1.5 +120. Vegas +1.5 -163. Miami is 25.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, the interesting thing about this one is that my model is actually a lot higher on Vegas. My model, now this is the other thing too, right? Because my model didn't make any adjustments for Vegas's team change, and my model actually had this as a 50-50 basically. And if I had it at 50-50, Like, that's the thing. So if I had this at 50-50 before the team change, it's very clearly Vegas has gotten much better. And you're telling me now that I'm getting +1, I think it says +150, I think it's like +120, +125. You're telling me I'm getting even more value than that, so I'll take that all day. That's my take on this. What do you think on this one?
Yeah, I don't hate it. This one, so the Vegas Falcons, their first match of the weekend where they play Surge, like, I'm comfortable saying I'd prefer to be on the Surge side of the market rather than the Falcons side. This one is, I don't want either part because I think this is priced about right. Again, going back to my napkin math, if you call Vegas Falcons 11th best in hardpoint, 11th best in control, their win probability goes from what I have as 16% up to 36%. And that's a 20-point jump. And yeah, +150 is a 40%. So I'm still a little short, but I'm not there on Miami either. That is basically right in line with the market. So I think that makes sense, though. I think just thinking about it broadly, like Vegas Falcons, to me, should get about a 10 to 20 point bump in win probability depending on who they're playing in a match. If I had Falcons up against FaZe, right, I'm guessing my model would have that Falcons are 3% to win. If you're just taking like what we've seen so far this year. Now with the new lineup, maybe you give that a 10% bump, maybe you give them like a 13% chance to win that. But in a match like this where it seems like you have a much more beatable opponent, right, maybe a 20-point jump is worth it. I think the market is pretty spot on. I agree, though, like, you're already on Vegas. Like, the fact that they should be better should be very intriguing for you, at least. I'd say your search number might be a touch high, just having them at 75%. That's the one where I'm like, I could see it get a little worse, actually, for Vegas in that mode. Maybe it's better, maybe not. And Miami have been horrible in search as well. Yeah, I just think your hardpoint number on Vegas is probably more correct than mine, and your control's probably not too far off either because Miami's control has been bad. So this is an interesting one. If Falcons don't beat Surge on Friday, I think they're super live to win this one, even if they struggle a lot. Like, if they get 3-0'd against Surge, I don't know if that factors into this one really much at all, just because Heretics are much, much more beatable. So yeah, if you like Falcons here, go for it. I'm just going to wait and see on these Falcons because I got no clue.
I think that's very fair, yeah. Saturday, match 2, LAG versus Carolina. Carolina -225 on the money line. LAG +162. Carolina -1.5 +100. LAG +1.5 -138. Carolina 17.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search. 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, we think this number is very wrong. We are both massively on Carolina here. Is LEG getting way too much credit for subbing in 2 players? Is that what the market is saying? I don't think, like, we've seen Fellow and he's been okay. He's not been amazing, and we've seen Ojani and he's been okay. Like, these are just okay players, right? They're better than bad players, but they're okay. They're just simply okay. Are we missing something on Carolina? What do you think?
I don't think so, no. I think LAG's moves are more lateral than clear improvements. And yeah, so I think the market is just assuming that they're going to get better, and they very well could. They've been very bad this year, so it's hard to get worse. Like, it's that saying, it's only up from here. Like, you technically could get worse, but it probably will be as bad as it has been. Maybe you get a small improvement. In Carolina, we know what we're getting with. Carolina Search and Destroy, very good. I have them ranked 3rd in the league. The map set change for them doesn't matter a ton. It's a win one, lose one sort of a thing. Vault, very good on Vault, 5-1 so far this year. And Skyline, they've only played once, then they lost that one time. So Skyline is already an auto veto for Carolina most of the time. So losing that map doesn't matter much, but losing Vault is definitely going to hurt. But they're top 5 on all the other 3 maps that we have currently in the map set. And they're a good search team, so I expect them to be pretty solid on Rewind and Dealership as well. And one thing we know about LAG is that they've struggled a ton in search. So, yeah, I think our numbers are pretty accurate just based on the fact that the LAG moves we think aren't going to be huge needle movers, and we know Carolina are solid. Yeah, I don't know. This is priced pretty accurately, but I'd much prefer to be on the Carolina side of things. The -1.5 is not great because Carolina aren't the most reliable hardpoint team in the world. So there is a decent chance where LAG pick them off in a hardpoint and just scrape by in that map 2 or map 3. Like, that's very live to happen, but I think if Carolina can get to that map 5, even though it's a little bit of a scary situation, like, they have the search and destroy pedigree to bank on. Yeah, I prefer Ravens here, but yeah, we just gotta wait and see on LAG. Like, we don't expect the lineup change to matter much, but we've seen that story a bunch throughout the years where is this going to do anything? Surge, even earlier this year, they made a lineup change and we were like, maybe this will work. And sure enough, it was amazing. This, maybe not. I tend to think that it's not going to matter a ton. So, Ravens for me.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Ravens are the play here as well. Moving on to Saturday match 3, Cloud9 versus Optic -200 on the money line, Cloud9 +150. Optic -1.5 +100, Cloud9 +1.5 -138. 25.5 point favorites. Optic are in the hard point, -1.5 in the search, -1.5 rounds in the control. We're both on Cloud9 here. We both think Cloud9 is massively undervalued here. I a bit more than you. My model really likes Cloud9. My model thinks Cloud9 is like one of the best teams left. Is one of the best teams, maybe the third or fourth or fifth best team, give or take. And it does not think that of Optic. Yeah, I don't know. My model's probably a little too low on Optic, and maybe it's a little too high on Cloud9. But even if then it comes closer to your mod, to where you are, and you still have you have a pretty clear lean on this one.
Yeah, Cloud9 are like basically Carolina. I think they're relying on search and control quite a bit, and they're solid at it. And hardpoint has gotten better for them since the early portion of the season. They've really turned things around in a nice way. So yeah, I'm not surprised my model has Cloud9 as the favorite here. One thing I did want to mention though, so our expected wins models differed quite a bit on Cloud9. I think we were about 1 win off from each other. You had them about 3.2, and I think I was at like 2.3, something like that. But I have Cloud9 ranked as 6th in the league right now. And I have them finishing 9th in qualifiers. So most of that is just, it's a tricky schedule for Cloud9. They don't have anything easy, really. I have them slight favorites against Optic here, but that to me, this feels like a toss-up. I really could see Cloud9 coming through here, banking on that map 2 and map 3, at least splitting the hard point. That's very viable. And yeah, again, I got to wait and see on Optic. Like, I think they are improved. Are they the same team we saw early in the season? I'm going to need a weekend of results to see. I don't know. Even just looking at scrim results the last couple days, like, Optic had a great day of scrims against FaZe the other day. I think they won like 7 of the 8 maps they scrimmed. And then I think just today they were playing LA Thieves and they lost like the first 6 that they played. It just was the complete opposite. So Optic maybe are going to be a hot and cold team throughout the year. Like, they're just going to be the perfect streaky team where it's some days they're on, some days they're off. I don't know. I do know that Cloud9 has turned their season around and they look like a very competitive team. So their prices look pretty interesting. So I'm in agreement here with you. I like Cloud9 just ever so slightly here, for sure.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what Cloud9 can do here, to see if they've really taken a step forward or not. This last match on Saturday, Ultra versus Boston. Ultra, a really large -600 on the money line. Boston +350. Ultra -1.5 -200. Boston +1.5 +150. 25.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search. And then no spread in the control, but they're -800 in the control. I've got pretty close to book value here with some slight edge on Boston, or rather just absence of edge on Toronto. But it just seems like Boston, again, our numbers are pretty much in line with the market here, but I think like Boston is maybe a bit undervalued based on what they did in Major 2. Ultra may be a bit overvalued, right? Because the thing is, our models move quickly when there's new data, but there's only been so much data on these teams, right? I think Boston is actually a pretty good team here. They've definitely made a lot of improvements recently. They had 3-1 Thieves in round 1. They had not a horrible run in the major. So maybe if I had to bet anything here, I'd probably bet Boston +1.5.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit, actually. I was considering that. We'll get to it at the end of the show, but I was considering Boston plus 1.5 for my picks of the week. And I'll reference it again, like Toronto Ultra, the search and destroy map change, I think it's going to hurt them a little at the very least. They're not going to be perfect on dealership and rewind. Boston Breach, it helps them a little. They were 4-7 combined on Skyline and Vault, which is somewhat in line with where they are. They're just sub 500 in search and destroy. So ditching those maps, maybe they're closer to smack dab 500. And maybe if Ultra come down a little bit. I think my search number on Boston is definitely low. I like where yours is, just above market. I think it should be somewhere 40-ish%. I think the hardpoint number is pretty accurate for my model. Like, these teams met at Major 2. Toronto 3-0'd them. The one map that was close was map 1, hardpoint. And I think it still makes sense. Boston hardpoint has been all right for them for most of the year. And Toronto have been better, but they haven't been great at hardpoint. So yeah, I could definitely see Boston winning that map 1, maybe getting a little boost in map 2 if Toronto come down a little. And then yeah, the thing with Boston is just map 3. Like, their control is so bad. It's actually shocking that they're not worse than Vegas Falcons in terms of like win percentage and margin of victory, because every time I watch Boston play control, they get blown out. So yeah, that's probably not going to go their way, but I think they're good enough to split the hard points, maybe win them both if they have a good day. And if the Toronto search and destroy logic comes through for what I'm thinking, like, Boston are good enough to compete in search as well. So I expect Toronto to win. I think they're definitely the better team here, but Boston have the tools, I think, to put up a better result than they did at Major 2. And maybe the prices for this are inflated just because we just saw these teams play. Toronto 3-0'd them. It ended their tournament. So yeah, that might be factoring into it a little, but I think that just makes for better prices on Boston. Yeah, I like it. I don't love it, but I think Boston is the preferred side.
Yeah, I like Boston here. I think if I had to take a pick, although my model doesn't love it, I would take Boston here. Sunday, last 3 matches here for Sunday. Minnesota versus Boston. Minnesota plus 110 on the money line. Boston minus 150. Plus 1.5 minus 200. Minus 1.5 plus 150. Boston 22.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and then technically 1.5 round underdogs in the control, but it's shaded to my plus 175, basically plus 125 in the control. Again, my model likes Minnesota here. I don't know why my model loves Minnesota so much, but it seems to. Maybe Minnesota will get 3-0'd by Optic on Friday, and then this won't matter. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. I don't hate a play on Minnesota here, but I'm probably going to stay away from it. Do you see any lean here, or are you just going to probably stay away from this one?
Yeah, for all the love I just gave Boston against Toronto, I agree. I think Minnesota are probably the side I'd prefer. I already, like, my model is with yours. Like, we already see value on Minnesota at plus 110. This feels like a very coin flip game. But again, I think Minnesota might just have gotten a little bit better adding Kenny to their roster. So you could maybe add a couple win probability points in their favor. The thing that jumps off the page for me is Minnesota map 3. And I know it's minus 175, which isn't the most appealing price in the world. But again, Boston breach control is horrible. And Minnesota, like, they're not great. They're league average at control. But yeah, I don't see how the market is more like 60-40. I think it's definitely closer to 70-30, 75-25, just based on what Boston has done all year. They got the same lineup. Yeah, I don't know. Something's got to change for Boston in that specific game mode. Unfortunately, the meta is the same for map 3, so I feel really good about Minnesota winning that mode. You could even take a minus 1.5 if you wanted to, just because Boston are not strangers to losing 3-0 or 3-1 in control as well. So that's really the thing that sticks out. I think map 1 and map 2, both teams are pretty competitive on, but that's the difference for me is map 3. Like, I just feel so much better about Minnesota winning that, and that to me is the decider on who do I expect to win this series. I do expect Minnesota, even though we don't know how Kenny is going to look. Like, I just know Boston map 3 is not reliable whatsoever. Yeah, give me Rocker here. It's another big Rocker week for me, which we saw how that turned out last time. Not great, but maybe they'll right the
Yeah,
ship.
I don't love putting everything on Rocker, but we'll have to see. Maybe make this bet after we see how they do against Optic. Don't bet this one before the Optic game. Second last match of the weekend, FaZe versus Carolina. FaZe minus 500 money line, Ravens plus 333. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 225. Ravens plus 1.5, plus 162. FaZe minus 52.5. Hard point favorites, 1.5 rounds favorites in the search, 1.5 round favorites in the control. And yeah, I'm just a little lower on FaZe overall, but nothing crazy. I think the price is just a little high, but to be fair, when Carolina plays the top teams, they don't do this. They beat the lower teams, but the second they play a good team, they just can't compete. So yeah, the price is justified. I just don't know if I could bet it. I don't, but I also don't know. I definitely don't think I can bring myself to bet a plus 162.
Yeah, man. I feel like FaZe is just going to burn me over and over again because I do think they're just a little overpriced in a lot of their series, but they still come through really nicely a lot of the time. I will say, just don't be shocked if FaZe come out of this weekend and they're 1-1 because like we know Toronto is a solid team. Like they ran through the losers bracket at Major 2. They had a nice Major 1. Their qualifier periods have all been consistently good. Like Toronto, good enough to beat FaZe. Do I think they will? Probably not. Carolina, very similar team. Maybe a notch below Toronto in terms of just overall strength, but they're solidly built. Like they are probably going to have to win this through a couple of searches and something else, whether that's a hardpoint map or the control. I think maybe control. They don't have a control map where like they are great on, but they're solid across the board on all three modes. So I'm interested to see how the veto process plays out for map 3. But yeah, I think Carolina pretty live to win control if things go the right way. Like they're probably going to have to push it to a round 5 and get defense and whatever, but I think they can thread the needle there. But yeah, you make a good point that Ravens, man, every time they match up against FaZe or Thieves, like they just get slammed. So maybe this will be the match where that changes, because I think they are good enough to compete with those teams. They just haven't shown it yet. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on this one. But I'm with you. I prefer Ravens. I think that the prices are solid. You can make an argument for anything, really. Like map 1 spread, you can make an argument for control. You can make an argument for. So because it's spread out, I think I prefer the plus 1.5. But taking them plus 333 to win outright isn't crazy. I'll just leave it at that. It's not crazy. We've seen FaZe struggle at times this year. It was very early in the season, but like Carolina, please just don't get slammed again. Let's change this narrative. But yeah, it should be interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment as well. Sunday, match number 3, Surge versus Thieves. Surge plus 240 on the main line, Thieves minus 334. Surge plus 1.5, plus 110. Thieves minus 1.5, minus 150. Thieves 22.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, 1.5 round favorites in the control. And yeah, we're pretty much right on here. I'm a bit lower on Vancouver money line and Vancouver in the search, but other than that, I'm pretty much on board. I don't see a ton of value here. I'm probably staying away from this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't believe how much we're in agreement. It feels like every match, you're like the words you say are the words that I would say if I spoke first. Yeah, I agree. I think this price is spot on for both teams. 2 of the teams that have not made roster changes going into Major 3. So yeah, I think our models are pretty dialed in. They differ on map to map, but for the most part, we see the market is pretty spot on. I guess we lean Thieves maybe ever so slightly if you're just looking at percentages, but yeah, I think the big question for Surge is you're good enough to win a hardpoint. This is the best hardpoint team we have. Can you win one or both? Because I think that's probably got to be the path. Obviously, Search and Destroy is always there for them, and their search has been solid, and LA Thieves' search has been not great, but solid as well. Yeah, because LA Thieves control is just on another level. Like, they are far and away the best control team we have. Vancouver have had their struggles there, so map 3 feels like it's Thieves', but Surge, you got 4 other maps where you can pull this thing out on. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how Surge look. We've seen this match. It feels like a bunch the last couple months, but yeah, interested to see how it plays out once again. But these prices feel very accurate to me.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one to see at the end, but I don't think I'm going to be touching that last one. Models versus market. Here is our picks for the week. I'm going Carolina -1.5 versus LEG. We're just taking that one out. Let's just see if they can do that, if Carolina is actually going to rebound a bit after Major 2. I've got Las Vegas +120 versus Miami. My model loved them against them even without the team change, so let's see if this will just finish it off. And then I'm calling for Cloud9 outright. I'm not buying that this Optic team is completely fixed, and I'm also buying that this Cloud9 team is not nearly as bad as it seems. What are your picks for this week?
Yeah, I'm going against Optic for my number 1 and number 2 picks. I just think, the prices are very steep. I get why Optic are favorites in those series, but I got to wait and see. I got to see it at least one weekend before I'm ready to say Optic are back. They very well could be, but Minnesota and Cloud9 are good enough teams to at least push them to a map 5, if not win. So I like that a lot. Maybe Optic. And the thing with Optic is, like, we've been wrong on them all year, both of us. Like, when we pick them, they look horrible. And when we go against them, that's when they turn it around. We'll see how that shakes out for me. And then I've got Minnesota once again. I'm big on Minnesota. I can't stop. But yeah, Boston Breach, control. It's just been horrible all season long. Minnesota are a league average control team. And if that's the case, like, they should probably be like -250 to win map 3. You could even take the map 3 spread, and that's totally justifiable as well. I'm just taking the -175 because I think it's still a good price. So yeah, give me those.
Yeah. Combined model plays. Here are some of our combined model plays for this week. We like Vancouver, moneyline, -1.5, map 1, map 3. But again, asterisk on that one because that is the play with Vegas in there. We like Minnesota there against Optic, and we like Toronto there against FaZe. Yeah, slight value, not that much value though. Miami map 1, Vegas map 2, Carolina, we like them against LAG. Cloud9, we'd like them against Optic as well. Boston, we like Boston there as well against Toronto. That could be a big +315 on the money line there. Minnesota moneyline +1.5 against Boston. Carolina moneyline +1.5 map 1. And then Thieves map 1 there against Vancouver. Other than that, Major 3 week 2. We will record that next week. Hopefully we get lines earlier than we got them this week. And we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good week, everybody.